All right. Welcome again, coaches. It's good to see some new coaches, new faces, and also some other ones that have popped in from Tuesday night's session with Gary Gold. Tonight, we were very lucky to have our Junior Wallabies head coach, Jason Gilmore, come on and talk to us around a little bit around the skills curriculum, but he'll be coming around and talk more about that. But a big one is around the relevance, what he uses from a Junior Wallaby point of view and what he's looking out for players to come out of our system and then go into his system. So really looking forward to this one. It's great to see we've got pathway coaches in here, Premier Grade coaches, but a lot of youth coaches in this space. So Gilly, I'll just pull you in this one, mate. And then from there, you want to give us a little bit of a background of your story just so we can get to know you a little bit more, and then we'll get into the presentation.
Yep, easy, mate.
All right. When you're ready, mate.
Thanks. Thanks, guys, for having me this afternoon. It's awesome that in these times that we can still stay connected as a rugby community. And, I know certainly on your side of town and in Queensland and that restrictions are starting to lift and we can start get the boys back out in the field, which is a good thing. In terms of my background, I'll just give it to you in a nutshell. Rugby league background in terms of playing wise, and then I went to a high school that only played rugby, so that was my first introduction into rugby, and probably took a little bit of time just to get used to the game and that type of thing, but got a real love for the game. In general, went to uni, studied physical education in secondary school. Once I finished that, I was fortunate enough to get a job as a development officer at the Queensland Rugby Union straight out of uni. So I gave myself 3 years there to see if I could do something. Otherwise, I'd go back to teaching, and made my way through the development ranks there. And I was just under Dylan early. We did a lot of coach education work, which when I look back on my coaching now, kind of formed the nucleus of how to present in conjunction with my teaching degree, the art of teaching and coaching, but also the knowledge wrapped around it. Always love coaching. I'm really passionate about player development and seeing young guys coming into programs and really developing themselves as human beings and as footy players. And you get a lot of satisfaction out of seeing the boys go on to achieve their goals and their dreams and be really successful. So that's my real drive. I just love seeing young blokes that want to work hard, commit themselves to a cause, and are really passionate themselves about what they want to do. In terms of my coaching, I'm probably a little bit like the players. I've come through the pathway. So always coached when I was studying at university, just in lower level teams at the school that I attended. So I've coached at school footy, junior club footy. I did representative teams within that space, did state 16s, schoolboys. I'm lucky enough to get a job after development in the high performance unit at the Reds, looking after their youth development. And as is the way with coaching, the Reds were struggling at the time for coin, and our area got hit the hardest quickly. So I had to jump out of there and launched into school coaching with First 15 at Toowoomba Grammar and Churchie, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And then got the tap on the shoulder to come back into the Reds to head up their academy, where I was lucky enough to coach the Super 20s for the Reds, head coach NRC with Queensland Country, and then moved into Super Rugby with the Reds as their defence coach there for a couple of years. And then lucky enough, I've been able to do the Junior Wallabies for the last 2 years. So in and around that, I've done a lot of work with club football as well. I've coached Colts, reserve grade, first grade. So you name it in that space. I've spent a lot of time, and I think that's where my passion really comes from, is understanding that system and knowing what it takes to come through it. I feel I can add a lot of value there, but that's my background in a nutshell. Where it goes from here, who knows? I just love being on the field with a whistle and being amongst the boys coaching. So as long as I'm doing that, I'm really happy. So that's my background in a nutshell. What I'll do is I'll just share my screen. All right, that's all good, Dale?
Hang on, I'll just pull mine off. There we go. And yeah, I think yours is starting to come up now. Can everyone see Gilly's screen okay? Yep, all good.
Got it, mate. Yep. Yeah, cool. So what Dylan's asked me to talk about is just the game model that we developed this year, which was something that we did in conjunction with Dean Benton, who's our national head of strength and conditioning, and I'm sure a lot of you guys will know Dean or heard of him, but he's one of the best strength and conditioners getting around in the world. He's worked with England Rugby, Brisbane Broncos, Melbourne Storm, and a lot of high-level individual athletes as well. And it's something that we got our heads together at the start of the year to go, right, in the under 20 space, and it's just not junior wallabies, but from under 20 below into our pathway, is how we're actually developing the players coming through the system and what's really important for us from a skills point of view, but also from a physical capacity point of view, with fitness and power and speed development and flexibility and all that type of stuff, to link it all into one model. And then how we bring that to life. We've called it curriculum, but we think that's a little bit boring. So we're just going to, at the moment, just call it our pathway skills model. Is what are the skills that we're looking at developing within the playing group? And this is kind of where we're at the moment with our players coming through the system. If you have a look at someone like Alex Masabaka, who in the last 12 months has obviously achieved a lot at a national level and has come through the WA system really well. Awesome young man, very good footballer, and a guy that's on a really good trajectory at the moment. But if you have a look at Massey in the last 12 months in terms of the number of coaches that he's had in the programs, if you look at his school footy, he's probably had a couple of coaches here. So I might be off by one or two, so bear with me. With his club team, I assume he's probably had two coaches attached to his club team. In the academy, he's had Ando and Deal work with him. Last year, he made the WA under-18 team, but also got shipped across to ACT to give him some more game time, so he would have had four coaches there. Came back from the Aussie 18s and played at the URC, so he was with Logs plus the boys there, so another two coaches. In the Aussie 18s, he had Huey, myself, and Brad Gill from Sydney. At the start of this year, until the program just got put on pause with the virus, he had three coaches work with him across that program. He's obviously started to be involved with the Force program with Sambo, Van and Nick. So if you look at Massey in the last 12 months, he's had 20 coaches. And I think the beauty of rugby is you do get exposed to different people, which is really important from a growth mindset point of view as a young man and as a footballer. But what we're starting to look at now for Massey is for him to be the best, whether it's an open side or number 8 in the country in his peer group, and then obviously up into rapid rugby or super, is all the people on that page, are they connected in a way that we understand Massey's strengths and weaknesses? And across the table there with that group is, are we pushing Massey's strengths to the absolute limit? Because at the end of the day, that's what he's going to get picked on, is what he's really good at. And what are the areas that he needs to improve to make sure that he doesn't have any areas in his game that might hold him back from a selection point of view. And if you look at that, the other thing to combine in that is all those different teams, they're going to have different line-out calls, different attack shapes, different defence calls. So there's a lot of learning from it for young footballers coming through the system at the moment, that we want to make it as simple as possible for them, just to hit the training field and making sure that everyone's on the same page. So what Adrian Thompson has done, is the head of talent management, and my reporting line is we've developed this year national profiling. So Massey has got a profile as a footballer, which his coaches then rank his skill set, technically and tactically, and how he is physically. So it's a one-stop shop that all of his coaches can get access to, so we can actually see where Massey's headed and what we need to do as a group. Because as he keeps moving through, those coaches will start to drop a little bit. But that's just the nature of the beast at the moment with our young kids coming through the system. Is that too many coaches? It probably is a little bit, but that's the environment that our young guys are facing at the moment. So this is the basis for the game model and the skills curriculum to say for a guy like Massey, this is how we're going to pour our effort into you to make sure that we make you the best footballer possible. And he's just not like a golf ball in a concrete room just bouncing around everywhere. This is something simple that we did, and I said to Dylan, by all means, guys, screenshot this stuff, and we're recording it so you guys can get access to it as well. But for Massey, we just wanted to highlight for him to be selected. Obviously, he can play across the back row, but we're looking at him as an open side initially, was keeping it really simple. Because for me, as soon as you keep it simple, you get really good clarity, but you've got to drive good standards. What were the things in his position that we were looking for selection, which meant with his preparation, he had to make sure that he was the best in the squad. And it was all transparent. There was no bullshit with selection. We weren't hiding stuff. And what we're looking for with our sevens was he had to be the best defender in the footy team. He had to be a breakdown surgeon, so understanding when to go for ball, when to go for body, or leave the breakdown and get into the defensive line or into attack shape. And generally, sevens, the way that we play them in junior Wallabies is they're a roving role between the 15. So his ball carry is really important to us. And we put points below those, but we got to the stage by the second camp that I wanted the boys to start to take ownership of it. So where the ticks appear, that's where Massey's starting to put his own points under there, which he then puts into his craft or his extra sessions. But we make sure that through our training session that we're putting good attention to detail on it. So with the defence, Massey had a bit of a habit. He loves flying out of the line and not talking to anyone and jamming in, which leaves holes either side. So sometimes when he hits the guy, it looks good, but other times if he doesn't hit him, he can leave space. So he wanted to work really hard on getting consistent line speed, and he's generally a pretty high tackler, so he wanted to work hard on his chop tackle as well. Breakdown surgeon, he just found that he was attacking the ball too much, not getting pace, so he wanted to work on picking his moments and being a pest at it if he wasn't hard on the footy. And with his ball carry, he found that he's a type of carrier. He didn't want it at the line. He wanted to get the ball early in his hands where he could use his footwork. So it was about us understanding how best Massey carried, and then we had to fit that into our system to bring the best out in Alex. And then just ball security with him, because he can get a little bit loose with his offload and one-handed carry, which he really started to pick up on. And then physically, obviously he was a bit injured at the start of the year, so his fitness was down. So fitness was a real focus point for Massey, but also that ability as a seven to do repeat efforts. So not just working in single efforts, but twos and threes. And then just with his mindset, just opening the boys up, like this is the real driver. Being a young guy, we had a lot of back rows that were 20 coming back in. Carlo Tizzano, who's a Perth boy who made his Super Rugby debut. The young guys can get really overawed by some of those super guys coming back, but we really wanted Massey to compete hard, not worry about making mistakes if his effort was really good. And we knew that if he backed himself, he'd go really well. And he finished our second camp getting awarded the best forward from the camp, and that was by his peer group from the older guys. So he was travelling really well. But that was just a simple thing that when Massey said to us, "What's my feedback, Gilly? How am I going?" I'd always drive the boys back to their player development, so we weren't scattergunning it and just pulling stuff left, right, and centre, making stuff up. But all of his feedback went into being the best defender, breakdown surgeon, ball carry, and his physical capacities that linked in with that as well. And if there's any questions along the way, obviously Dylan will control them. Just throw them in as well, boys. So in terms of the game model and skills model purpose, the one thing that I'd say with the game model and the skills model, I know Dylan's been sending out the links and it's accessible on our website, is on the left with the train tracks. What that means is we're not telling guys how to coach. We don't want everyone to coach the same way because there's just no growth in that. And I know for me, if someone came in to tell me how to coach 100% of what I do, I probably wouldn't be coaching for too much longer, because I really love the art of coaching, putting things together, being creative as well. But where the tick is, it's exactly what we're after. And I thought this picture summed it up really well. The aim, the game model and the skills model is for all of our coaches, and I've got there our coaching family, is for the coaches is when you need it, or if you're struggling, or if you just need a bit of consolidation of what you're doing, is the game model and the skills model is there to provide help, advice, support, guidance, assistance, whatever you need. It's sitting there in the backup for our coaches. And obviously Michael McGripplis, our coach head, has filmed hundreds of drills. We've given some of our drills from our junior Wallabies trainings as well. Whatever we've got, we want to get out there to help our coaches as much as possible. So for you guys, it might be a key point in halfback passing. It might be a ruck defence drill. You know your key points, but you just want to have a look at some different ideas on how to actually put it into drill format. That's the outcome that we're after. And like I said, with the paintbrush, is we really encourage coaches to have a go. And the beauty of coaching is have a crack. There's going to be some times where a drill's not going to work how you wanted to. Perfect. We're no different to the players. Edit the drill, refine it, change the dimensions, change the numbers, get rid of it. If it works really well, then you've got a good drill. So I really encourage our coaches, don't be afraid if the drills aren't nice and neat and look choreographed, because I reckon when they are, I really question whether we've challenged ourselves and the boys, and I'll talk about our unstructured gameplay in a second. And the role of us as pathway coaches, I see is really important, because we sit right in the middle as the link between our three major groups. We've obviously got our base, which is our clubs and schools, up into the pathway, and I'll term pathways our first grade, second grade, Colts, and our representative underage state coaches. And then obviously up into our high performance, up into our academies, rapid rugby, super, NRC. And for you guys, like, we look at that as players, but it's also our coaches. It's both groups that we want to work really hard on, that we're moving players through that system, but we're also moving our coaches through as well. And we're really keen to promote both within our playing base and also our coaching base. So for us as a group, if you look at that model, we basically coach all of the boys that move forward into high performance. So our ability and our accountability to make sure that we're coaching the players well is really critical. And that's something that I'd encourage, is self-reflection on, are we doing a good job, and just not accepting mediocrity with it, and to challenge ourselves with what we're doing as coaches. Now, in terms of the game model, so this is just an overview of it. The game model, and I'll go into a little bit more detail with it, the overarching thing that we want with our players is, number one, is they're smart. So I think we spend a lot of time on drilling with core skills and position specific, and we do a pretty good job with that. It's the understanding and the how and the why of coaching points into the players, so that they can understand why they need to do a certain skill, a certain movement pattern, or a certain decision. So that the smarts that they bring to the game is really important. And just that relentless attitude, it's just a mindset. So whether it's your training ethic, work on the video off the field on a laptop, work in the gym, recovery, knowing when to switch off as well, and getting that balance with your life. But as a rule, we want our boys coming through the system into junior wallabies, but that they're smart with their footy and they're relentless with their approach to what they actually want to do. And with a game model, this is where we changed a little bit. We've got 4 pillars. So we've got set piece, contact, unstructured, and structured play. And what you'll notice there is we didn't siphon it into attack and defence, because I reckon a lot of our training sessions will be warm up into skills. We'll do some attack, we'll do some D, and we'll finish with a team run. Depending on what competition, 50 to 56% of the game now is spent in unstructured, so line break, turnover, and kick chase. So what we wanted to open up for our coaches was the understanding is, do you actually understand the principles of our unstructured play, how to coach them, and do the boys actually understand them? Or is unstructured play kind of that accidental nature of training that we do a little bit of? And what I encourage you to do is, in a typical training week, is have a look at the percentage of how much time you're spending from set piece and structured phase play, as opposed to the unstructured game. So if the unstructured game is over half of the game, is over half of our training going to be unstructured? And also being realistic, when the guys are in learning blocks in pre-season, and it's going to be a lot more block training, obviously there's probably going to be a little bit more time spent on learning lineouts and scrums and plays and that from it. But once they nail that, those training reflect what the nature of the game is. And just to get some bite into it, we've taken it off the curriculum because we don't want it to go into schools with these fighting analogies, but it was just something that we wanted to grab the attention of the players. And Vern Gambetta, who's a guru S&C from America, he said, a word paints a picture and a picture paints an action. And I thought that was really good. So what we've gone with is a gang fight mentality for our set piece. So what's a gang? It's with a group of mates, you've got a common cause and you're fighting an enemy or another gang. So that's perfect for our scrum, line out and kickoff. Our contact skills, which is tackle, ball carry, breakdown, that's our dog fighting. So that's a bit of ego, one-on-one, one winner. You can't hide with your contact skills. Unstructured play is our street fight. What does a street fight look like? There's no referees, there's no rules. It's laissez-faire. Anything can happen. You've got to make sure that you've got good awareness and you're prepared for anything. And our structured play, which was from kick-off, scrum, line-out, that's our title fight. So that's where you're starting from the set position. You've practiced what you want to do. The referee's in control of what happens at the start, and you need to be clinical with your execution. So we thought that was a good way to really sell that to our players in terms of what we're doing. So with some of our junior wallaby stuff, once we got the understanding of that, we'd just be, right, our training session today, and we'd plan it with the coaches as well. It'd be a street fighting session. So it'd be all of our unstructured play, but the players understood, right, we're in unstructured play today. It wasn't attack or defence. It's just a different way to look at it.
Billy, just to jump in there, mate.
Yep.
So just around that theming terminology, was that something you brought in when you first came into junior wallabies, or that came year 2, or where did that stage happen?
So we did this theming with the curriculum at the start of this year.
Yep.
With junior wallabies last year, we used this street fighting and title fighting. The attack coach is Shannon Fraser, who's at the Waratahs, and him and I really challenged each other on dropping the attack and the defence.
Yep.
Because a lot of principles, what we're finding was both sides of the football. So unstructured play in attack or defence, what do you need? You need reaction to the drop ball. You need to find your own space really quickly. You need to get connection either side of the ball. So what we wanted to talk about was common principles both sides. So we weren't doubling up on our language on what we were doing. So we probably trialled it last year, built it into the curriculum this year, and then consolidated it this year, Dale.
Did you find at all that just the mindset around, you know, these type of areas in the game sort of flick when you started adding more around the theme and the actual fight element to it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think the biggest thing, mate, was you're also going to spend your time in attack and defence. I'm not saying you're not going to do that, but the biggest change that we had last year and the most successful change that we had with the boys was the focus that we put on unstructured play and our movement patterns. And I'll talk about our movement patterns in a second in relation to the junior wallabies. But I reckon I look back now, even a couple of years ago, everything was very in its box, structured versus unstructured. Attack and defence. And I had a really good look at how I was coaching and what the game was. And we did a lot of analysis into what the game looks like these days. And I reckon if I had to say one thing, it was how we coached the unstructured last year. That was probably the most successful thing with the boys.
Cool.
And then underneath the game model, obviously we need the skills that bring that to life. So we just divided the skills into core skill, rugby IQ. So we actually wanted to bring a smarts element into it, because I think with skills models previously, it's obviously technical, it's position specific, but we wanted to bring that mindset. And I think that was the thing for the coaches as well. I think we had really good coaches of technical skills, but that ability to have that clear understanding of the tactical knowledge was something that we wanted to really support our coaches with as well. I'll just drop out of there. So I don't want to bore you with the ins and outs. I just wanted to show you from a junior Wallabies point of view with this game model, the skills that we're looking at for the players that by the time they got to junior Wallabies and then on to Rapid or Super, is that they could actually do it. So if we look at our set piece, that was scrum, line out, kick-off and maul. Now there's a lot of other little points in there as well, and I'm not saying that they're not important, but these are skills that in order to do these at a high level consistently well are really important. So obviously with our scrum, our setup, and then that links in with our skills curriculum. It goes through the setup, shape during post, contact, constant pressure, 8-man, line out, kick off, obviously jump, lift, technique, speed, throw accuracy, delivery, etc. So I won't bore you with all the little points, but if the guys could come through to our level with those three things, with an understanding and an execution, then we know that we're ahead of the game rather than sending them on to professional level. And our Rapid Rugby and Super Rugby guys are going, geez, we're having to upskill these guys in the basics of the game, and it's just taking too much time.
Sorry, just on that, mate. Are you able to, one of the comments was just around making it a little bit bigger?
Yep. Is that better, mate?
Hasn't come out yet.
Is that the Excel one, or is that the PowerPoint, Dill?
That's the Excel one.
Yeah. So that's as big as it'll go on my screen, mate.
I know. Hang on. Maybe it's a PowerPoint actually presentation. You've dropped out of it's the PowerPoint.
Okay. Hang on, mate. I'll just.
There we go.
Is that the PowerPoint or is that the Excel?
That's now that's zoomed in, and we can see you shifting across. So that's fine now.
Okay. All right. So that's all good.
Yep, all good.
Beautiful. And then what sits underneath that, obviously, once you get into the pathway and senior footy and that type of stuff where you've got strength and conditioners, is we wanted to make sure that for the boys to be able to scrum well with their setup, good shape during the scrum, post-contact, and then that constant pressure, is the physical needs of this, and this is where we work with Dean Benton on, is total body strength, mobility, neck, trunk strength was really important in the development of the players physically in the gym to be able to do that really well. So then what that meant was the strength and conditioner was a piece of the puzzle to produce footballers that could perform on the field, and we had good transition out of the gym and with our strength and conditioning programs into the footy side of things. So rather than the boys just going and doing programs in the gym that 80% of the time are okay, we wanted to be really laser-like with the boys' development across it as well. With our contact skills, obviously our tackle and second man into that tackle was something that was really important to us with the points below, ball carry breakdown. And then with our unstructured, we're looking at kick transition both sides. So it's kick chase and also kick retreat. And the big one there is that first 10 metres winning the race. And I'll talk about that in our movement patterns with our junior wallabies. And having the focus of it's just not the kick chase or the kick retreat, but it's that phase plus the next two phases. So I know from a defensive point of view, our terminology is always kick chase plus two. So it's the kick chase element and then the next two phases, because we felt if we could go three phases in a row, generally teams would kick the ball back to us where our counter attack could light up. Or if we're really good on the first 10 metres sprinting past the opposition, then that opened up opportunities at the first breakdown or second breakdown to get hard on the ball or to counteract through because they had no support there. Again, turnover transition was really important. Kill ignite, I'll talk about that in a minute with our game model. And line break transition. And the one thing that I would highlight with line breaks, particularly in attack, is because we play systems so much now in our attack in Australia, whether it's a 1-3-3-1, 2-4-2, 2-5-1, whatever the case is we see a lot of our young playmakers that when a line break gets made, 20, 25 metres, generally a lot of our young 5'8s are sitting 20 metres deep and they're sending up three forwards in front of them to take the ball or to trigger through the forwards to actually get them to play. And I reckon we just need to be careful of our 5'8s at the moment. I think they've gone from being decision makers and ball players to simply ball distributors. And a lot of the time they sit them behind the pot of three forwards, get a trigger pass, run on a 45 and just dish the ball. Whereas probably when we came through, like to get in front of a 5'8 for a forward was probably near impossible because that's what the 5'8's job was. So I think we just need to make sure that we're promoting our 5'8s to get up into that front line when they need to, but particularly if line break transition, we want to play quickly from line break and not slow it down and play too deep.
So just Gilly on that one, just for the coaches, how would you put that into a training environment around actually practicing line break transition? How would you put that into your session given that scenario?
Yeah, one, it's the education of what you're looking for post a line break. And the key question there is if you make a line break, where is the defence going to go to? And you've got to anticipate it. And obviously most of the times defence will run to where the line break happens because that's the immediate threat that they've got to stop. So questioning the boys, right, well, if they're all running to the line break, where's space going to appear? Right, it's going to be wide. To get the ball there quickly, how do we do that? Right, we need to flatten up, get the ball quickly, shift into space. What happens if you send a pot of three forwards up and you're playing behind it? Oh, it's taking up a bit of time. Well, what does that give the defence? And then when you actually put that into games is being able to review it to see what they do. But a lot of repetition. We play a line break game. It's all unstructured. And we only play three phases. So we want a result within three phases of our line breaks. And if the boys don't do it and they've been standing deep in that type of stuff, we want them to be able to problem solve. So our job there is to guide them. But I think one, Dylan, it's the education of what we're looking for, and then two, it's giving the boys the opportunities to make mistakes, feel what success looks like, so they actually know, right, well, let's step up in front here. And if you're looking at a sprint, if it's a line break that goes 25 metres, you'd hope that your 5'8" can run quicker than 3 forwards as well. So it's pretty simple biomechanics that we want to get up there and play really quick and not slow the ball down.
Cool.
And then with our structured plays, this was scrum, line out and kick off, was we had a real, see how you go with this. This is something we used this year that was working okay, but on your first 3 phases, I've just done a review in Super Rugby, and the average defence that you defend for in Super Rugby at the moment is 2.4 phases. So it's not long, and that equates to 19.2 seconds. So the chopping and changing nature of the rugby at the moment, going from attack, defence, unstructured to structured, that type of thing is huge. So whatever element that you're in structured plays, you've got to make sure that your first phase, you execute it really well, and that you're hitting gain line, or in defence, you're taking gain line. You bring energy to your second phase with your movement off the ball to get good shape with what you're running in attack or get good fold. And then that should give you double gain line, hit either side of the ball. And then by that third phase, you should be excelling. So if you're on attack, you should be bending that defensive line hard. Or in defence, you should be applying pressure and taking metres off that the teams want to kick in poor position. So it sets up your counter attack. Or hopefully you're creating error through tackle contest or on the ball contest. So being really prescriptive on those first 3 phases in terms of the mindset that you're after is something that we taught around with this year. Understanding in the field zones from a structure point of view what the outcome is that you want across those field zones. And we did a lot of work with this with Stephen Larkham last year, but what's our kicking strategy? And probably with our young guys at the moment, the tendency is to kick when nothing much is happening. But when that happens is generally you're standing still or you're moving backwards, so you don't have the time to kick. And it's understanding that if you're on the front foot and looking at the backfield coverage, but some of the best times to kick is when you're actually on the front foot, because you've got more time and space to execute your skill, as well as looking at that backfield to see what we're doing. So they're in a nutshell, they're the 4 bins that we're looking at the moment for the boys coming through the system, from a coaching point of view, but also from a physical point of view, that we need to get the boys going. Not saying that we're doing this poorly either, fellas. Like, the boys are coming through in some areas really nicely, in other areas, and it's very individual. Like, we had a couple of number 8s last year that didn't understand how to control the ball at the back of a scrum with their feet, or understand how to pass. Very good carriers, very good tacklers, but when it got to running back row plays, or if we had dominant scrum to trap the ball at their feet, those finite skills were the things that we're probably finding that we're just a little bit down in at the moment. Having said that, I reckon coming from last year to this year, putting the emphasis on it, coming through our pathway, and particularly through the academies, the boys are certainly improving in that area, but we're not quite there yet. But I see that as exciting. That's the opportunity that we've got ahead of us with our players coming through the system. All right. And that was just the basis of the theming of that game model. So I'll let you guys read that. I've kind of explained that previously. Now, with the game model, guys, I'm not saying for your teams that you go and copy it and you do everything to do with it. I reckon the best way to look at it is just reflect on yourself, and do you have a game model heading into the season that is the focus point for your teams to be successful and to get player development. This is the one that we're using for the Junior Wallabies this year. So if you think about the big one that I just spoke about, this is how we themed it for the Junior Wallabies. So we had an SAS theme, and we're really big on speed, action and smarts. And speed for us was our movement patterns off the football. We had to be the best in the world at our movement patterns off the floor in our first 3 steps. Action is our contact. And I said to the boys, we can have the best game plan in the world, but if our movement patterns and our contact skills are poor, the game plans don't mean shit. So we had to make sure that we put real emphasis on that. And then the smarts in terms of understanding your detail, understanding what we were trying to do. And the better your movement patterns are too, you've got more time to anticipate and make better decisions on the football field. So they were all linked in. And then the 4 areas that we went with our game model was with our forward pack. Benny Moen, who's the next Wallabies captain, is really big on that pack mentality from the boys. And our 3 key areas with the boys that we need to dominate for World Cup performances was we had to have a good scrum, line out into line out maul, and we had to make sure that our kickoff reception was really good. And it was probably saying 2 years ago, we were really poor at, we'd score points, but then we'd drop a kickoff and we'd leak a try straight away. So we spent a lot of work last year on making sure that we could catch our kickoffs and going back-to-back tries, not giving up tries straight away. Defence domination, and they're just words that have got real bite into them as well. Like everything that we wanted to do and do, we wanted to dominate body language, communication, energy off the line, contact skills, retreat, fight on our try line, everything we wanted to do, we wanted to dominate. And our 3 areas that we wanted to do well is our kick sprint, which is our kick chase. So we just didn't want to kick chase, we wanted to kick sprint down the field. We wanted to get a positive outcome within 3 phases of whatever we were doing. And our border control was our D zone, so on our try line. And that looked at how we defended our try line, but also at the end of C zone and B zone was being really disciplined with our defence to not allow entry points into our try line. So it worked both ways. With attack, it was territory control. So whatever part of the field that we're in, we controlled it and we were looking after it. We weren't getting dictated to by the defence. Conversion kings was any time we're in the top 40, we wanted to come away with points. Everyone always says once we hit the 22, we want to get points. We challenged our thinking, our players on once you cross the 40-metre line, we come away with points, both attack and defence. So an attack, it might be you earn a penalty, you take the 3 points, you earn a penalty. Your kicker has the responsibility of getting it close to the try line for a line-out maul, so if you get 7 points. Or if you get repeat scrum, penalty or line-out maul, pull down, then hopefully you're getting a yellow card for the opposition, so you're attacking against 14 men. Pressure master, so whatever part of the field that we were the ones producing the pressure, not getting pressure put on us. And we didn't have in there specifically exits, but when we decided to exit was that we had really good control on call, movement to where the kick and what our chase looked like, so we're clinical with our exits. And then hitting the switch was our unstructured play, both sides of the football. So as soon as that went into kick or turnover or line break, was we had to hit the switch really quickly. With that kill or spark, kill was if we dropped the ball, we had to dive on it within 2 seconds. So it killed the opportunity for the attack, for the opposition to attack off unstructured. So then we could go to defensive scrum and then apply pressure through set piece scrum and also our defence. Or on the flip side, if the opposition dropped it, we had to pick it up within 2 seconds and spark the ball. So we actually then wanted to play in unstructured. We measured that all through our training sessions. We went really hard on, even if it was a 4-person passing chain with no defence. If we dropped the ball, we expected someone to scream, kill and dive on the ball straight away. And we would measure that through our analysts. And the next day on the team wall, we would have our top 3 players that did it well, but then we'd also have our bottom 3 players and then a percentage of what the team was on. And what I'd say early is there was a lot of quietness, like the ball would get dropped and the guys would just reload quickly. So it was that, probably took us 3 or 4 sessions to make that really reactive and going well, but we had to persist with it because that was a really big thing with our unstructured play. First 10 metres was any time there was kick, turnover or line break, because we had to be the quickest at sprinting in the first 10 metres to get into shape to take advantage of the situation and attack, or to get our defensive line together so we get the ball back within 3 phases. And again, we just labelled that the hard yards. It's the shit that no one wants to do and that people don't see. But if we could win the hard yards, that was a massive element of hitting the switch for us. And then just connection both sides of the footy. So if it was line break and attack, we expected connection to the tackle contest. If it was turnover and defence, we expected to connect from outside in, 5 metres of spacing, and get that line together. So connection was a really big part. So that was something that we explained to the boys, that all of our energy, game markers, analysis, field training, we had to be the best at the competition at the Junior World Cup as a forward pack, defence, territory control, and then hitting the switch in our unstructured. And we kept driving it back to what brings that to life is our SAS. We had to be the best at our movement patterns with our speed, the best at contact, and we had to be the smartest football team. So that was a really nice way to make sure that we just drove everything back. And then that development plan that I showed with Alex, with the Junior Wallabies, of as an open side what we're looking for, then his player development plan sat underneath it. So that way we got really good alignment from our game model into our skills development, into our player development. And there was no ifs or buts, there was no grey areas. And it took a little bit of time to explain early, but it was really important that the boys understood where we're heading as well. And then this is just like personal. So this is, 5 questions through or challenge or whatever. It's really good to have that done. But for me, the last probably 3 or 4 years as a coach, I've worked super hard on getting speed into our movement patterns. And we just called them our rapids. And you guys probably use them as well. But anytime we're on the floor, we had to be off the floor within 2 seconds. And our first 3 steps had to be our quickest. Now, you can't sprint everywhere. But if you get up off the floor quickly and get moving quickly, you're going to be ahead of the ball. So what that might mean in defence is your defensive fold is actually quicker than the pot of 3 forwards coming around the corner, which means we can actually get off the line square and apply pressure and take space and time. So it's all about increasing pressure, which is time and space, or decreasing pressure. From an attack point of view, it's obviously you want to beat the defensive fold around the corner with your initial movements. And we work really hard with our GPS, with our high speed meters, because there's a difference between proactive and reactive high speed. And what I mean by that is I might be playing Dylan and he might jog slowly in defence and then I might get the ball quickly, but because he's moved slow late, for him to catch me now, he's got to sprint late. So yes, he's got his high speed, but it's a reactive high speed where he's coming sideways and he's got no time to actually do anything, versus proactive where he moves harder earlier and then he's got more time and space to actually get composed and see what he wants to do. And I've just got the flag there, the Swedish flag. Like, we want to avoid neutral movement patterns. So have a look at your games. Does the attack and defence just move at the same speed around the corner or back on the short side where no one's actually winning gain line because everything's equal all the time? You don't want to be that team where you're just moving the same speed as the opposition, because then it just turns into a slugfest and you're not actually doing anything. So we really prided ourselves on being the best moving team off the ball. And again, that lit up our shape. And then the second picture is just our contact skills. And there was no hiding behind it. The better you carry and the better your tackle is, the better your breakdown's going to be. So we put a lot of emphasis on our ball carrying, our tackle, and then the subsequent actions of what the contact was. And we knew that if we hit our markers with our speed and our contact, then our game model would light up. So that was 2 really simple philosophies that we brought in with the junior Wallabies. And then that's just an example of how we gave the boys feedback just to back it up. So there's other important skills like passing and all that type of stuff, but because we went really hard on our movement patterns and our contact, and we kept it really simple. So we had detailing behind the scenes on our carry with, post meters, gain line hits and all that type of stuff. But I reckon sometimes when you look at dressing rooms and the carries divided into 6 different carries and the tackles got 6 different tackles, it becomes white noise. And I'm a bit old school with this. At the end of the day, with tackling, you want to know how many tackles you made and how many you missed as a footballer. And that's what you look for. You're not hiding behind grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 tackles, second man in. I've got that detail, and that's important for me to highlight to individual players. But overall, we wanted to put real pride on how many tackles we're actually making and what our ball carry was. And then with our breakdown, it was our entry point. So attack breakdown, that's first man entry, second man entry, third man entry, really positive. And we wanted more first and second man entries versus second and third man entries, because that showed that we had good movement pattern. And then if you're poor at the breakdown, so too slow, lost the shoulder battle, gave away a penalty, opposition counteracted us, then you got a negative. And that was first man, second man. If you got down to third and fourth, that was also decision making. So if you were third and fourth, but you overloaded a breakdown, you weren't needed, then we gave you a negative for that, because we expected them to be smart, back to the game model, our smarts, read it, get on your bike and start reloading. And you mightn't be needed for the next phase, but it could be the one after. Defence breakdown's exactly the same. Any turnovers that we've got, jackal, tackle error, intercept, tackle over the sideline, penalties that the boys gave away. This is our rapid, so how quickly they were off the floor within 2 seconds. 2 seconds is hard, but if we made it 3 seconds, it would turn out to be 4. That's our defence reload, off the ground and moving, and then the hard yards on our first 10. And then we just give the boys the total positive actions and give them a percentage of what they do. So we went really hard, like I said, just did our contact and our movement patterns. And as soon as you put stats and figures, obviously the boys look towards this. What we really promoted to the players was we wanted more in this column where you're getting around the footy and doing something. I didn't want a guy walking off the field with 15 out of 15 actions at 100% and they look $1 million, I'd prefer a bloke to get 30 out of 40 action sitting at 70% because he's actually doing something. So making the boys feel comfortable and confident in the environment, not to be worried about error if their effort was really good. And then for a guy like Michael McDonald, who's obviously from Perth originally, obviously with his catch pass and his box kicking, we'd sit down with him separately and go through that. So it's specific to him. But as a team, that was the emphasis that we put onto the boys.
Gilly, just on that one, Brownie's got a question in relation to that. Brownie, you want to come in and take your screen off mute? Hang on. I've unmuted you now. Off you go, mate.
Got me. How are you, Gilly?
Good about yourself.
Good. Look, the Irish used to rate their breakdowns, their involvements in the breakdowns 4, 3, 2, and 1. So 4 was basically, perfect. 3 was, there, okay, but not as good as it could have been 2, and so on.
Yeah.
And then they used to tally them up for the end of the game. So, a player might look, if they'd got 24 involvements, they'd have 80 points for the end of the game. What are your thoughts on assessing a player's effectiveness in terms of their work around the paddock rather than just their involvements?
Yeah, definitely. And this would be involvements as well, mate. Look, we've come through a system at Rugby Australia where we coded everything green, orange and red, which would be similar to the 4-3-2-1.
Yep.
For me, it gives the players a get out of jail card, Brownie. I reckon.
Yep.
Like, if you look at the carry, what do you want to carry? You want gain line or head and
Yep.
shoulders through the contact point with good recycle or offload to keep them.
Yep.
And I reckon as soon as you label it green, orange or red, or you're a 3 out of 4 on that.
Yeah.
I didn't like that. You either fucking did it well or you did it to the standard. So it was really simple in the background. Not saying it's wrong, Brownie, at all. But for our boys, we wanted to hit them between the eyes between you've done it well or that's just not good enough. And if they weren't doing things good enough, if there was a consistent pattern, then we had to get them better with their skill development.
Righto. Cool.
Good to see you, mate. Long time no see.
Yeah, mate. It's been a while since you came up to the Sunshine Coast and watched some of our sessions.
Yeah.
That's good. Congratulations on your 20s too, mate, by the way.
Thanks, mate. Right, do you want to keep going, Dill, or any other questions?
Yeah. No, that was just Brownie's one. So, on to the next one. Thanks, mate.
And then just with I'll just share just the skills curriculum. Is that the skills curriculum, Dill? Has that come up?
That's the spreadsheet version.
Yep. Cool. So, guys, this has obviously been sexied up onto a document that sits on our website live, and I think Dylan sent the links out as well. I'm not going to take you through every single point on this. This is the final thing that we'll talk about in terms of the skills model. I just want to explain how we actually put it together. So when you go back and refer to it, you understand it. So with the core skill, what we're saying here is with our game model is if you think about catch and pass, if I ask the group, what are your top 3 points in catch pass? We'd probably all be reasonably similar, but there's probably 1 or 2 points that we'd all do differently. And they're all important. So we're not saying that those points aren't important. And this is what I get back to Alex Masabaka, is for him, what are the main 3 points that he needs to do really well with his catch pass? And is every coach on the same page with him that touches him, whether it's Junior Wallabies Club, Academy, Force, whatever the case is. So with catch and pass, we sat down with a working group and also with Mick Byrne on this as well, was if the guys could understand and execute, catch early, so hands off their chest, keep the ball above their hips, so that way their elbows loaded and they don't drop the ball below their hips where they pass with a straight arm, but also give a cue to the defence on when they pass, because as soon as that elbow's loaded, you can pass short or long without having to reload, and also punch hands to the target. So if we can do those three things really well, generally the passes are going to get executed nicely. Now, there's going to be other things about shoulder rotation and all that type of stuff that comes into it, hand position on the football. They're all really important, but they just got to get done in the background. But the main three things that we want to push hard with our language, with our coaches, with catch passes: catch early, ball above hips, punch hands to target. With the carry, we want to scan early, so looking. Footwork, so that might be, if it's a pick and drive, lateral to forward. If it's an outside centre, it might be an overs line. So it's footwork in the relative position and also field position. Once you get into contact, being able to fight with the power step, and then through the contact is either keeping the ball alive when you're on your feet, offload, shear, whatever the case is, or if you go off your feet, pop it up, or long place. So they were the key aspects you wanted with that carry. With the tackle, obviously foot in close, head position, punch wrap, leg drive. So they're pretty basic, those ones. And then with the breakdown, where there's a lot of moving parts, we kept it really similar across attack and defence as much as possible. So obviously in attack, you want to keep eyes on threats, which is potential jacklers. In defence, it's eyes on opportunities. So that's looking at the ball or looking at taking body. Winning the race, so accelerating into contact and not decelerating. So in attack, you're either onto the ball carrier, looking after the footy, or if there's no one there, is just being present over the ball and scanning. Obviously winning the race in defence, so you're first in a contact, and then winning the shoulder battle, so that's our body height, and then leg drive. And what I'd say with our shoulder battle is we've probably got a little bit of an epidemic at the moment. The guys running really tall to the breakdown, particularly in attack, because they're tall, to actually hit a target point to clean out, they've actually got to stop their feet because they've got to drop late, and that's where they get shoulders on backs, but they've got no speed through contact. So we're pushing really strongly at the moment, particularly through the academies, that the height that you want to clean out on, you want to enter that contact point from 2 metres away at that height. So it gets back to our physical capabilities of, are we flexible enough through ankles, knees and hips to be able to maintain that height to keep our feet moving through the contact point. So that body height's a really important one, and having the physical capability. So in a nutshell, they're the big ticket items that we're looking at with our core skills at the moment. Now, with our coaches, what I've put in there, if you look at the catch passes, I've just bucketed it under catch pass positioning, just before the action, during the action, and then post the action. Just a little bit of detail on coaching points across it. So in all of our core skill, there's coaching points in each of those elements. Now, you don't need to go and learn every single one of them because it'll put you to sleep after 2 minutes. But if you're struggling a little bit with coaching tackles, some players are really struggling with their footwork, what's some key points that we can look at? Then you can go to the tackle component of it and have a look at feet positioning, work hard early to get into position, outside foot forward if you're from 0 to 2, defender from ruck, inside foot forward, tackle selection depending on position. So all of the key points are then built into it. So it gives you a bit of a guide if you're struggling a little bit in behind the scene there, then all of the points are there. So we're not saying go and learn them all. That's not the case at all. It's just to sit there to help you. And then this will be the last one that I'll talk about is, this is a bit of a matrix that we kept getting asked from our clubs and our schools, and leading into the pathway was, at what level should our players be able to do things? And so this was a guide to say from under 12 through to basically junior Wallabies or under 20 level, our expectations when we launched our players into the professional level was, this is how you can incrementally set up the players to develop their habits. And I divided it into creating our bases under 12s to 14. So that was about providing good opportunities that the players are enjoying it, that we could retain that base. Developing the players when they hit 15, 16 and cognitively they're getting better, physically they're starting to mature. And if you look at our state and national competitions, obviously that's the time that we're starting to really heavily talent ID the players coming through the system. By the time they're 17 and 18, we want really good game habits with what they're doing. And then by 19, 20, we want to optimise their talent. So that's the philosophy that we're looking for. But as I said here, players can obviously progress slower or quicker along that spectrum as well. So it's our jobs as coaches to understand that we're going to have different, we're going to have players at different levels. And it's really tricky. Like, do we just blanket our training session, or do we have little parts of our training where There might be skill remedial being done with some groups. Your better players might be getting challenged with more games-based activities, and then you bring them all together. So that's a real challenge for us to make sure that we're addressing the different needs, which isn't easy at times, particularly with resources and the number of coaches. Now, if you look at it from a learning and performance capability, so creating our base at the younger ones, that's a focus on foundation of coaching points of the core skill. Developing the player is ensuring the players know the how and why of their foundation points. That's starting to get that understanding in rugby IQ. When they're getting older, creating game habits, 17 and 18, that they can start to critically analyse their performance, and then we can start to challenge, particularly tactically, in their decision making, and then optimising their talent is getting them at that autonomous level. So it's developing from cognitive to intermediate to autonomous with their skill acquisition. Now, autonomous is really difficult. If you look at our Wallabies or Super Rugby players or the Force, there's only a certain percentage of players at the moment that are at that autonomous level, but we want to be greedy, and that's what we want to hit. But what I challenge us on as a group is where I've got players is swap the word players for coaches. So for us, developing the play, ensuring coaches know the how and why of the foundational coaching points. Or do we just hear it, copy it, and repeat it? Rather than players can critically analyse performance, can coaches critically analyse performance? So that's our accountability as a group to our playing group. So then that's how it's built all the way through. And again, you can link back in with the coaching points within that matrix of how we're doing it. Now, the last thing that I'll leave you with is where it's got under 12 through to under 20, you can change that to training age. So if you've got players in the game that are new, they might be at training age 1. That's under 12 level. Training age 2. And I know we've had coaches in these courses that coach women's rugby. And that's a unique environment that you might be coaching adult women, but sometimes they might be their first year in the game where they're actually still learning it. So this is where you can adapt this matrix to really suit your team with what you're doing. It might just be a bit of a checklist at the start of the season, mid-season, end of season, just to see how we're tracking. But that gets back to it's a guide, it's help, it's tips, it's support, and it's guidance for what we're doing as a coaching group. So that's kind of the work, guys, that we've been doing in the background. And just the dashboard on our Rugby IQ, nice and simple. Eyes, comms, feet is how we term it. Eyes is scanned in the V early, so outside, straightforward, inside. So everyone's got their V's up, then you overlap them as you go across. Communication, volume, using action words, using player names. A lot of people will just use action words. So if I'm with Dylan in a defensive line and I'm saying fold left, it gets caught up in white noise. Whereas if I scream Dylan, fold left, I'll get an instant reaction with it. And comms is also listening and reacting to calls. And how many times do you see a halfback when players on the short side are screaming for it and the halfbacks get nervous to come back across the grain, back to the short side, and they just keep playing open side to the 5'8", so being able to react to the calls. And with our feet, 2 seconds off the floor, first 3 steps are our quickest, and making sure that we're controlled with our movements so we're just not running around helter-skelter with what we're doing. And then with our position specific, there's a shitload of work to go into this, but we just picked the traditional areas of the game. So we went with scrum, line out, kicking, and that's spiral kicking and drop punt, halfback play, and high ball catch. So we really wanted to focus on the guts of the traditional areas of the game, and then we'll build in running lines, etc., depending on what position. So that's a big body of work. I won't bore you to death. I probably already have, but that's available on the website as well.
Awesome. All right, thanks, Julia. I've got Ali. Ali, you want to jump in? You had a question? And anyone else that wants to send in questions, just get on that now.
Is that through, Dills?
Yep, got you.
Hey, Gilly, just an extension on Ian's question.
Yep.
Just from working with some of the young academy guys, did you find they responded better to just the 2 options, either it was good or bad, instead of giving them that orange zone? Or did you find it took a bit of kind of getting used to for the boys to actually kind of understand some of the analysis, either because their action may have been okay, but the analysis said it wasn't at your level, so it wasn't good, so it was coded as bad. Did you find it kind of hard to get the boys used to that? So kind of saying that you weren't harsh on the call was harsh, but you were trying to improve them with it.
Yeah, and it's how you. It's a really good question. It's how you approach it as well, because if you mark them poorly, but then you just rip them to pieces, then they're going to lose a lot of confidence with it as well. So it's for them to understand that if we're marking it poorly, it's not to be highly critical or anything like that. It's to actually get them better as football players. And I reckon what it did with their extra is because we call it craft. We built craft either pre-training or post-training, that the players looked after that themselves. Was if we tagged it green, orange or red, which we did the previous year, I reckon when the players sit in the orange, it doesn't push them hard enough to want to get better at that skill. It's almost like, it's like when I was at uni and you got a 3 or a 4, like a 3 was a pass. That's all I needed. Whereas in footy, that's not going to cut the mustard to play professional. So when we marked it green or red, if the guys are in red, they knew they had to work their ass off in their craft to get it better, to knock it up in the green. So I probably set the standard for them, I reckon, with their craft.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
But like I said, Alistair, like for some groups, maybe the colour system or the 4-3-2-1 that Brandy was talking about, if that suits them the best and that they're learning the best there, then I wouldn't be changing that, mate. Like really suit it to the style of team and age group that you're coaching.
Yeah, I was just looking at it from the kind of academy setup side with some of those boys and how they respond with it.
Yeah. Like I know for me, like if I got an orange with my coaching, it's just an A-means area for me. Like I either want to be really good at it, or if it's not good enough at the highest level, I don't want to accept mediocrity with it.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, mate.
All good.
Andre, you just had a question around that scanning terminology. I've just unmuted you now. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I just wanted to know the breakdown. It says there for your eyes, you got to scan the V. So what does that scan the V means?
So if you're facing down the field, Andre, so if I'm in defence, scanning the V means I look basically at a 45-degree angle to my inside shoulder and then to my outside shoulder. So that's my V that I see in front of me. So it's just not looking at the player directly in front. I've got to have that awareness of from inside to outside of that threat. But particularly in defence, then if everyone gets their Vs up, the bloke standing beside me will actually cross our Vs. So that helps us get connected and start talking to problem solve if we see a second man play that's running out the back rather than that coming late and then you get spooked. So it's looking inside straight forward and then outside on that 45 degree.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Just on that, Gilly, do you find it's really tough around these age grade players come in and their scanning and the approach to that?
Oh, 100%, mate. And I reckon what I would say where I would be harsh on the boys coming through at the moment is generally because they're all in pods and they have to link up with people left and right and that type of stuff, particularly in attack, they spend most of the time looking from sideline to sideline because they're so worried about where to stand versus actually looking try line to try line. So that's where getting that V up, and it's something that we push hard with the boys, is getting them with their shoulders and their chest facing the try line so they can actually look forward and see what's happening and not worry so much about, it's a forwards pot around the corner and we've got the trigger and they're looking left and right all the time, but most of the time they should be looking forward.
Yep. No, awesome. Brownie, I'll just bring you in, mate. You had your question?
Sorry to go on again, Gilly. I hope some of the other boys got some questions. Just wondering about mental skills with developing players. Obviously, they come through, and a lot of them have got there because they're good under pressure. They believe in themselves. They're good at staying in the moment and things like that. How do you go through in terms of with your training in terms of developing some of those mental skills with the players?
Yeah, so we last year we did some pretty cool stuff. We had this question with the curriculum as well, as like it's fine to talk about line out throw with the technique, but what about if it's 13-12 and it's pissing down rain and you've got to hit your target? Like there's a different amount of pressure mentally that you've got to cope with outside.
Yeah.
So with our boys last year, Brady, we did a heap of scenario-based training as well. So once we were comfortable that they understood our game model and our game plan, we locked the boys into 3 days or 2 or 3 days scenario training. So we split them up, and look, we're lucky that we had enough numbers for a couple of teams. But we actually split them into 2 teams, and we ran them through 8 different scenarios, from goal kicking from the sideline to then playing a kickoff. But the kickoff strategy depended on whether the goal kick got you in front or behind to contest, time on the clock. You just suffered a yellow card to your line-out caller. How are you going to deal with that? And we just let the boys go, mate. Like, we didn't jump in at all. We just let them feel it and understand it. And then that night, they actually grabbed the video, analysed it themselves. We didn't jump in at all. And then the next day, we repeated the exact scenario. So the boys knew what was coming, but we just tinkered with each scenario slightly. So it just threw them out of kilter again a little bit. And once they understood what the scenarios were about, mate, they absolutely loved it, because it gave them a chance to actually problem solve and feel pressure. And it might be on a windy day. If the wind's blowing across the field, don't always run try line to try line. Like, sometimes you need your kickers or your throwers to throw with a cross breeze as well. So it's understanding how to use your environments, wet footballs, bins, soapy water. So then you can put the ball into the soapy bin, and then your hooker's got to throw with the soapy football. So there's all different ways that you can actually challenge them with their mental aspect. But we really found that game scenario and educating them with that was a really good way to do it.
Okay, thanks.
Awesome. Rosie, I'll just bring you in, mate. And a sec.
I've just done it. Yeah. Mate, Gilly, nice to meet you, mate. Just one thing I've noticed with players, just understanding game momentum. Is that something that you bring into your rugby IQ component? So, when you've got good front foot ball, quite often you'll see your 10 sitting really deep and looking to shift really wide, when the opportunity is just to run flat and hard at holes that are in front of you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And that's where it gets back to, if you look at the rugby IQ, the first key point is eyes. Scan up in your V. So if they're standing too deep and not seeing it, then you've missed your first key point of the rugby IQ. So that gets back to the skill development of it.
Yep.
Momentum's a really interesting one, mate. I think it's a really important one, because when you've got it, you want to extend it, don't you? You want to increase the time that you're in momentum.
Yeah.
If you don't have it, it's how do you actually change that momentum? And I think a definition of it to the players is really important. And for me, momentum's energy, and energy is good movement and communication. Generally, teams that have got momentum, they're sparked up and they're active and they're talking hard and they've got good body language.
Yeah.
And it's how to turn that picture around. And I think the big one there, mate, is when you've got it, don't take it for granted that you're going to keep going. You've got to work even harder when you're in momentum. So that's got to be a call as a coach to make sure that you're sending the good messages out there, but also at training how you coach that. But if you're against it, generally it's in defence. So when you talk about momentum, you probably think more about it in attack. Is it only takes one action to change momentum, and it might be a really good carry, or it might be a really good tackle. So it's decreasing the anxiety around what momentum is when you don't have it with your playing group, and on it with what it actually is.
Yeah, and that sort of leads me to my second question, was that in game management as well, like managing the game from a key player position, when to slow it down, when to speed it up, when you've got momentum, how do you hang on to it? So is that something you guys also work with?
Yeah, and we've had massive discussions with our strength and conditioning as well. And for those guys that are coaching in environments where you've got S&C coaches and GPS units, and I had this chat at work the other day at Rugby Australia, we're always on about train fast, train fast, train fast, train fast, efficiency, don't waste time. And I get it from a physical capacity point of view, but there's times in the game where you don't want to go fast.
Mm.
Are we actually allowing the environment with our training for our game managers to understand when to slow it down, when to speed it up? But I think the key one with our game players, Wells, is what's their understanding of the game to actually then have an impact on slowing a game down and speeding it up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I know we had a 5'8" come through our system a couple of years ago at Junior Wallabies who was playing Super Rugby. And he wouldn't look at a playbook. He wouldn't look at video. He had no idea of how to game manage per se. Great tackle, big booming kick, could pass okay, but he couldn't actually move the boys around the football field yet. He was playing Super Rugby at 19.
Yeah, wow.
Well, I think that's where this game model and the skills model and the work that we do as a coaching group, mate, all of those things, how do we understand momentum, Brandy's previous point on mindset, mental ability, how to game manage properly. What I question is, are the boys good at it, or have we coached it well enough in the past that we're getting those players coming through?
Yeah, agreed, mate. Agreed. I think we've been too systematic, haven't we? Just let them play, and that's how they get to make decisions.
Yeah, and if you look at the structured versus unstructured worlds, not saying structured's bad or in unstructured's this godly thing, but on game management, it's to understand it. You have structured play to get into an unstructured environment. So in attack, you've got your structured play, you've got your pattern call and your starter play, and you might have your second phase, but that's to manipulate the defence into a position of weakness. And then once you line break and you're in unstructured play or you kick, then there's no rules. You're just playing footy.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I like. That's what I like the most, isn't it?
Exactly. And then if they coach well, then if they're in unstructured and shit's starting to fly left, right, and centre, and they're not sure what to do, then you've got your structure in the background. Then you bring your structure back into it. You call your shape, and then you get back into your structured play to turn it into unstructured. I think for our coaches coming through, I think we do the structured really well, but the understanding of structured into unstructured and game management and controlling momentum, for us as coaches, we've got to understand that ourselves first.
Yeah, cheers, mate. Thanks for that.
Cool, Jack. You just wanted to add on to that one?
Yeah, g'day, Jason. Mate, really enjoying the tonight's session, mate. Really interesting. Just probably add on to that question. Obviously, most of our old guys that are on here tonight, like us, we had a natural education in rugby in terms of, you go down the park and look up on man play. We didn't have the internet and things like that. So I think a lot of us grew up with a lot of, sort of general knowledge on rugby and things like that. Whereas obviously now kids have got a lot of time doing other things through social media and other aspects. Is there any way that you guys work on, that coach education, probably following on a little bit from Will's question, but, that you guys, use through your academies and things like that?
Yeah, I reckon the biggest thing that we've promoted, and I've got a slide here I'll put up just to finish off at the end, is get off the whistle. Because we do have a generation of people that are coming through that didn't have, like you said, the backyard battles that we had coming through, and that understanding of that game sense learning approach that we got through physical education and high schools and all that type of thing. I videotaped all of the warm-ups last year at the under-19 competition in Canberra, the URC. So they were the best kids in the country at under-19 level and very good coaches. And I'm not being critical of the coaches here at all, but every time a ball got dropped, have a guess what the coach did?
Blew the whistle.
Blew the whistle. And so all the players get programmed to do is when the ball gets dropped, they stop. And it's always, right, let's go back and start it again. We'll have time to go back and start it again, but let them play that unstructured environment out and let them make mistakes and understand that it's okay to make mistakes. They're not going to get yelled at all the time. And I think that anticipation and instinct in our players, we can definitely coach it when it's attitudinal. It's a little bit harder than skill acquisition, but it can be done. But if we look at our own coaching, is where do we actually let the boys play at training and just have a crack against each other, given that opportunity, and then when the play stops, then we can come back, and whether it's a start from a ruck or a scrum or a line-out. But I really think at the moment, and it's something that Shannon and I challenged each other last year on with Junior Wallabies, and at times we get back on the whistle, but we had a rule, for instance, so anytime that there was a drop ball and the numbers were 9v9 or below, we always let the boys play a phase. So if I'm coaching defence, I've got to know that in 15 minutes of defence, there might be 5 minutes of unstructured attack that's going to get played, because we need to let the boys understand how to cope with the unstructured. But I'd get that time back when Shannon did his attack. He might be doing 15 minutes of attack, but I'll get 5 minutes of unstructured defence. As soon as the numbers were 10v10 or higher, we played 3 phases, because then you had enough at the breakdown. It didn't have to be tackle. It just might be two-handed tag or whatever the case was. But we encourage picking it up, rolling it through the legs, offloading. If you make mistakes and your effort is good, no dramas. But we really built in that let them play attitude. And then once that stoppage happened, then we'd come back and play. And we found that a pretty important part of how the boys were developed last year. But it's a really good question. And, it's something different from our generation coming through, but I think we can still build it into our coaching sessions. Our sessions don't need to be choreographed. They don't need to be perfect. They don't need to be a million markers, whistles going off all the time. We need to be comfortable with being in the uncomfortable ourselves with our coaching. Understanding how to guide the sessions. I'm not saying that they're fucking messy and you're not getting any outcomes. You need to know your principles of your play. But you need to be comfortable with letting training flow a little bit more, I reckon.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, Jack.
So just to follow on that, Gilly, so obviously you guys themed and used some terminology around the kill it and the spark.
Yep.
Did that really, for you guys, when you're talking about the whistle and I guess stopping it every time the ball goes to ground, did that help as a coach, but also I guess the players around having a theme like that just to take your mindset away from that stop-start all the time?
Yeah, and it was really, it was awkward early, Dylan, when we're doing, we explained to the boys what the kill and spark was, and even if there wasn't defence, if the ball got dropped, we had to kill it straight away. And early on, the first 3 sessions, we dropped the ball and the boys had stopped because they're waiting for the whistle to restart the drill again. And it took us, we'd be barking at them a fair bit to get the notion in, but I reckon by the end of the first week we were together, you could just hear through the games the boys screaming kill if there was a drop ball and they'd dive on it. If they turned that over, you could hear them spark it up. And that meant, with our unstructured attack, find your own space, active attack and play. So we had our principles, but it took a little bit of time for the boys to get used to. And that's what I'm saying. You've got to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. It would have been easy for Fraser and I just to get back on the whistle and just can that straight away. But we believed that it would make a difference. And we went through some clunkiness in the first 3 or 4 sessions with it. But by the end of it, the boys had just run that themselves. But we gave them the opportunity to do that, and we stuck with what we believed in.
Yeah, cool. Just from me, how did you find the journey of the players around their, I guess, probably the belief around their performance from Oceania and then leading into the World Cup? Obviously there's been some lean years leading up to that point, but last year being really successful. So just how did the boys take that journey from your point of view?
Yeah, we sat down in January and we set ourselves 3 goals. So we obviously knew Oceania was a really important step to get confidence for the World Cup. So we wanted to win Oceania, obviously win the World Cup, and whoever wins the World Cup generally gets World Player of the Year in under 20s. And Australia's never had a World Player of the Year in under 20s, and obviously hasn't won a World Cup and never won Oceania. And once we set those goals, we didn't talk about winning from then on. All we talked about was movement patterns, contact skills, and your smarts on the football field. And we just set the highest standards to achieve those. But the biggest thing that we had to do was I needed the boys to be comfortable and confident to use their skills. I didn't want them making a mistake and then thinking that we'd yell at them and then they'd get away from the football. We needed everyone in that squad. We needed to squeeze every bit of talent out of it that we had. So a simple rule that we had was if you make a mistake and your effort is really good, love it, bring it. That's what we actually want. And that's my job, if you keep making mistakes, to fix it. If you make a mistake but your effort is poor, you're fucking going to cop a rocket, because we're just not accepting that. If you're going to win a World Cup, that's just not going to cut the mustard. So once the boys understood our coaching approach and what we really valued, that really helped leading into Oceania. Obviously, you play Japan and Fiji. We got some confidence up. Fiji, we played our second team and it was in the pouring rain and we beat them 16-0, and the boys got pillared a bit in the media because New Zealand had run a cricket score through them. And we were really quietly confident, we knew that was a really good victory because it was a different Fiji team to what we'd played in the previous years, and they went pretty well at the World Cup last year. And we just had such a competitive group, Dylan. They were such a good group of young men to coach, that whatever standard we put in front of them, they just ate it up. And Michael McDonald, he was the key to it. I remember the first training session, he just said to me, Gilly, everything we do has to be at world-class level, and we can't accept any shit below that. And that's coming from a kid that really hasn't been in a national program before. So that was a cut of the cloth that we had with our boys. And then beating New Zealand, obviously pretty comprehensively, the boys just got massive confidence out of it, which was good on a number of levels. Individually, they knew that they could compete. and they believed in the systems that we're putting in place, and they knew that what we were coaching was going to work. So by the time we got to the World Cup, they're absolutely fizzing. But we gave them some knocks as well. So in between Oceania and World Cup, we had a training camp in Sydney, and we actually took them to the Waratahs. They had a bye week, and we did an internal scrimmage, scrum, line out, general play, attack and defence against them. And the Waratahs absolutely towed the boys up. But not from a competitive point of view. The boys are up for it, but you're up against a Super Rugby team. So just those groundings and making sure that they kept their feet on the floor was really important heading into the World Cup. But we had a really good nucleus. Like individually, they were just so competitive. Half time, we ran in. I still remember it. We were running into the sheds, and us in New Zealand were running in at the same time. And we had a couple of really aggressive blokes in the forward pack, and they're just running past New Zealand, just saying, "Boys, you're not going to do it today. We got you." And I've never seen a New Zealand team drop their heads so quickly. So, look, the boys were confident in themselves, no doubt. But I think how we coached them to be confident in our system was a really big thing, and not having the boys hide if they made a mistake.
Yeah, cool. And just to follow on that, use Michael McDonald as an example. Is there, you've been in the role for a couple of years now. Is there a bit of a theme or areas that WA players seem to be stronger in, and areas that they probably need to be working on as a whole, if you look at all those players that have come through and been coached by yourself?
We've been really lucky with the WA boys the last couple of years. I think they come in not so much with a chip on their shoulder, but they want to prove that they can compete, which has been really good. And if you look at the WA under-19 team 2 years ago at URC, I thought they were really unlucky not to be in the top four, if not pushing the final. You had McDonald, Jackson Pugh, Victor Harris, Tizano, Jack Hardy, Grayson. There's a really good crew of guys coming through, and it was really good this year seeing Masabaka, Uris Anapuz. And I think for those boys, it's having them compete against the best so they understand and have confidence in themselves. Because I reckon with our smaller competitions like Melbourne, Perth and Canberra, particularly in grades, like it's tough footy. I reckon there's probably just as good contact as in Sydney and Brisbane in the Perth comp. But I reckon the speed of play and the execution in Shute Shield and probably Premier is a bit higher. So what the boys are exposed to weekly, I reckon from an execution point of view is probably, and not having a crack, is probably just a little bit lower than the bigger states. But the boys individually, they're no different. Like they're super hungry. Like we've been really impressed, mate, with the boys the last 2 years. But I reckon it's just getting them exposed to the higher levels quickly and letting them rumble with the boys.
Yeah. No, awesome. I think if there's anyone else that wants to chuck a last question up, otherwise I think a lot of them come through the group chat, but put your hand up if you want to have another one.
Dill, can I just share just one more screen, mate, if I can?
Yeah, of course. Yep. I'll stop my share.
Sorry, mate.
You should be good to go.
Okay, is that up, mate? Is that the skills model?
Yep, that's it.
Yep. Okay, I just wanted just quickly, just from a coaching point of view, this is probably something that I'd just say for all of our coaches, is something that I use myself, is just reflect on some of these things. And this is the art of coaching. So with the whistle, as I said, are you the type of coach that if a mistake is made, you just straight on the whistle and you reset the drill? Or do we actually allow for the boys to build that awareness and react on drop ball? 55 on average, 55% of the game is spent in unstructured play. Do we give the boys the opportunity to do that? And as I said, let it play out. And they're just some rules that we brought in. And with training, get dirty. Like training doesn't have to be nice and neat all the time. Now you need to have your training principles and you need to be able to guide the players, but we should be able to have a messy training session and be able to guide that into a really well executed training session. Might take a couple of weeks, might take a session depending on your training cycle. But don't be afraid if drills don't work or the players aren't executing how you want it to, because that's the art of the development. Getting speed into the boys for training off the floor in their first 3 steps, being really proactive, or are we playing neutral footy where the attack and defence is moving at the same time? Support plays a big one. And I reckon with our pod system, with our forwards, this has created it a fair bit. But the ability of getting that primary supporter on the inside of the ball carrier, lateral supporters alive, and if you're not blowing the whistle all the time, this is where it links in. So if you're letting them play unstructured, you've got to have support play to continue the play. Or are we just simply lateral when the tackle happens, everyone just flies past the football, and then we've got to come back in laterally to the ball. And then with communication, I'm sure you guys get it as well. Guys, what's wrong with this session at the moment? Oh, comms aren't good. And I fucking hate it. Like, it's just a devil's word for me, because the boys, it's just too easy to throw out. What is comms? It's a player name. It's an action word. You've got to be able to say those 2 things. And as I say to the boys, you're not in a library, turn the volume up. Like, footy's the great thing. You can actually be loud and express yourself. Don't be nice and quiet and not saying anything. Or Massey's a classic one. He's such a shy kid when he's in a new group. He says the right words, but he just doesn't say them loud enough that it's got an effect and cause a reaction. So making sure that action words, player names, and we've got good volume with our communication. But that's something as a bit of a guide that I use personally for myself, that I just checklist post-training sessions. So they're simple, but there might be something there that you might have a look at yourself individually.
Nice one. Awesome, Gilly. If anyone wants to have those slides, is that all good if you send them across? And
I'll flick them across, mate. Yeah, easy.
Perfect. So, like we said earlier as well, we've got the National Skills model. It is on the RugbyWA website. It links straight into Rugby Australia, so that is accessible as a PDF. But we've also got the other versions around the Excel as well. So there's resources here for us, and that's where we want to get to, where we can get a common language and across the board around at least the bare basics of the foundation skills. And as these players come through, like Gilly used the example around Mussy and the amount of coaches that he could see in that 18-month period, it is a lot of coaches. So I think, Gilly, thanks for coming on, mate.
Cool. Thanks for having
always
us.
got a lot of value. And as long as everyone that's, I guess, that's jumped on here, we've even got Billy jumped on from Irish Rugby Union as well, which is great to have him come on board from the other side of the world. But if there's anyone that wants to add a little bit more questions outside of this, Gilly, is it all good if we can just send them across?
Yeah, easy, mate. Happy to.
Awesome. Thanks for your time, Gilly. Thanks everyone else for jumping on. We will record this and we'll get to put it up on the website as a resource. Cool. All right.
Thanks, mate. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Gilly. Thanks, guys.